Compass FM, and one of the voices of North Canterbury we get in every now and again from the Ashley Rakahuri River Care Group, Grant Davey. Good morning, Grant. How are you?
Good morning. All right, thank you.
That's the way. She's a wee bit damp outside at the moment. Is this going to, this heavy rain affect the Ashley River at all?
It's unlikely to. The Ashley River doesn't get a lot of, the headwaters don't get a lot of rain from these northwest events. So, and so far the river hasn't come up at all.
Okay, but when the river does come up, it does bring a fair bit of gravel down. And that's basically what we're going to be talking about today in the Ashley River. What is happening with gravel extraction on the river at this stage?
Well, before the very large flood mid last year, which is a 1 in 100 year event, ECAN were not going to accept any more consent applications because the bed levels of the river were below what was required for flood protection, and they were consistently getting lower. So the flood did bring down a certain amount of gravel, but after that the extractors were told that consent applications wouldn't be accepted until ECAN had decided how much there was to extract. Mm-hmm. So, but despite that, a couple of consent applications have been submitted, two very large ones. One of these for 180,000 cubic metres to be taken over 5 years has actually been granted for between the railway bridge and State Highway 1. The other one is for 302,000 cubic metres, so we got a total of about 500,000 cubic metres being applied for, 180,000 granted so far. And that consists of an area between the Cones Road and railway bridges and another area of about 2 kilometres upstream from the airfield. And this second application is currently on hold. It was made by a company which has run into problems in the past in the Ashley. They've been taken to court for non-compliance with the consent conditions. And the group doesn't really want to be working with such people. We don't really trust them to carry out work along the river in an acceptable way. Also, part of their application area between the road and rail bridges could cause serious problems for local residents, and I hopefully that is being taken into account in the applications. But both of these companies use drone surveys to calculate what volume of gravel was actually available.
Yeah.
And I understand early advice from Environment Canterbury was such that such surveys would not be accepted. We're hearing differing opinions as to how much gravel was actually brought down the river and how much is available to be taken out. And we have not seen enough evidence that there is actually enough to justify taking out 500,000 cubic metres.
What's going to be the process from now? There seems to be a wee bit of disagreement. The problems with the consents, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's all in the hands of Environment Canterbury. I think they've got actually quite a few problems with that particular consent, which they're ironing out. They have asked for further information. Mining
in rivers it's known to destroy Braided River, or the nature of the river, the braided nature of the river too, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you read the international literature on braided rivers and you find several things which are well known to destroy their braided nature, and one of those is taking out too much gravel or sand. Another one is constricting the river too much. Another one is damming them. And I don't think enough notice has been taken of that international literature. So one of the main requirements for the presence of a braided river, as opposed to a single channel river, is large supplies of gravel. That's why you get braided rivers coming off mountains.
Yep.
And we have a long-term cumulative impact problem here with gravel extraction. It's not a sustainable resource, not until we get the next glacial period and a whole lot more gravel coming down from the hills.
I don't think we've got time for that.
No, that might be quite a few thousand years, but until then we've got to make do with what we've got. And what we've got is basically gravel that is accumulated along the river. It was brought down there in the last glacial period, ended about 11,000 years ago, and it's also gravel which is coming out of the banks of the river all along. And over time we've planted a whole lot of trees and made those banks less erodible, so there's less gravel available to come down. So by taking out all this gravel, we're slowly destroying the natural characteristics of the river. If we do have to take gravel out, if it really is sure that there's so much there that it's going to impact on flooding, we need to do large-scale mitigation to retain the braided nature. Gravel cannot just be taken out willy-nilly, which is pretty much as what has been happening.
And that is what's been happening. And do you believe that that's what is going to continue, just willy-nilly? Hey, there's some over there, we're just going to grab it. There must be a plan there somewhere.
There is certain restrictions on what they can do. Like they can't take gravel out of the water. They can't take gravel from within a certain distance of the water. They can only take it down to a certain depth. They can't take it very close to the banks or groins or anything like that. But other than that, in that distance from Railway Bridge to State Highway 1, they can sort of do whatever they like. They do not submit detailed plans on what they're going to do, and then they're not given any detailed instructions on what they have to do.
Wow.
So the reason why protecting the natural braided character of the rivers is so important is that the birds that breed along the river, they require it to be braided for nesting and feeding. So we've found that braided sections of this river, and they are declining, have about 5 to 6 times as many braided river birds as non-braided sections do. And for example, 92% of black-fronted tern nests in the last 3 years have been on islands as opposed to on the edge of the river. And you only get the islands where the river is braided. And it's so important to nest on islands because it gives a degree of protection against predators, not against Norway rats, which have been the big problem this year, but against hedgehogs and cats, it's fairly effective. So gravel operations can also locally damage the breeding habitat by taking away flow from around islands, so predators can get onto those islands, and we've had examples of that. You can, if you take a whole lot of gravel from an island, lower it down, floods will take away nests much easier. And we just had in December, 125 cubic flood as measured at the gorge, and that flooded away a lot of nests. You drop the level of those islands down lower, a smaller flood can do the same thing. They also, by taking the gravel, open up access to the river for hoons. And there's nothing in the consents about making sure those access points are blocked so the hoons can't get in at night, and that can be serious.
Grant, I was actually going, hoons, I've never heard of that type of bird. What is a hoon?
I think everyone knows what a hoon is. It's
now I do.
Irresponsible driver, mainly four-wheel drivers who get out there and drive around in circles and can kill a lot of birds.
Absolutely, I'm making a joke, but having a bird called a hoon, that's absolutely interesting. We do have to wind things up here, Grant, but I understand that there is a whole bunch of other issues with gravel mining that you guys are concerned about as well.
Yeah, well, we're concerned that we haven't been consulted enough on this whole process, and we're concerned that the whole application process and assessment of environment effects is just simply not up to international standard. So some of these things are just cut and pasted from other applications. And what I have to say is that some of the birds on this river, especially the black-fronted tern, are genuinely endangered and they need protection. And they need... there's so many threats to them. We don't need the habitat being destroyed by basically irresponsible mining.
Commercial withdrawal of gravel from the bed, that could upset everything.
If it's done properly, it can actually help in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to see. If it has to be taken, do it properly, and it can help. It can help make islands, it can clear weeds, and can make feeding habitat, but there's not enough thought being gone into that.
At the moment, are you guys in consultation with the consent process, or are they approaching you at all?
Yeah, well, we're talking to the people, but we actually have asked the consents people to come along to the river, and it hasn't happened as yet.
Okay, all right.
So one last thing, if I've got time. We have a major safety issue.
Yep.
With this gravel being taken out of the river over stop banks where the road is single lane, is public, and there's no visibility, and trucks come roaring over these stop banks, and it just cannot continue because they will hit somebody.
Okay, well, we'll keep a close eye on that, because Compass FM, we're very, very proud to be associated with the Ashley Rakahuri River Care Group, and thanks for coming in, Grant, on a monthly basis, keeping us informed on what's happening just to the north of Rangiora, and helping out and doing what you can for endangered species in North Canterbury. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much to you.
Compass FM.